Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it up for some pretty significant cruising someday soon. If that's the sort of thing you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. So what are we up to today? Well, we're making a mess, of course. We're making a mess because I'm down in the lazarette lockers in the cockpit dealing with steering stuff. Most of you are probably wondering why I didn't just take off on a little mini cruise, slip the lines as soon as I started the engines, and well, the reason is the steering really isn't quite ready yet, and we'll go through all of that. It's a kind of a miserable task, but I'm done. Ha! So one of the first steps with finalizing the steering is dealing with these two temporary rope splices you can see in here. We were just here, weren't we? And yes, we have a relatively close proximity to the exhaust pipe, and I have a solution for that. But that's not today's project. Today's project is to replace these sections of rope. And the reason these sections of rope are in here is because this location here behind this seat in the aft cabin, I think is the most accessible point to put A, the turnbuckles, and B, the splice, or at least the connection between the upper helm cables and the lower helm cables. Now this is a cable running from the lower helm to its adjustment turnbuckle through this piece of rope through to a cable that goes to the quadrant. There'll eventually be another steel cable that comes through here. This is long enough so its turnbuckle will actually be here, offset from it, so that it's less likely to catch on anything. And then it'll have a short cable that loops around from this turnbuckle through there, or a shackle in there, to the other turnbuckle. And they're offset far enough that even when I steer the boat, none of the turnbuckles can bump into each other. And that's to avoid a jam. Now the other thing I'm going to do, of course, is, or not of course, but I'm going to put a piece of high density molecular weight plastic between the two sets of cables, so there's never a chance cables traveling in one way can catch cables traveling in the other way. And this means all the adjustments, the maintenance, and looking after that kind of stuff is all done in a relatively easy to access spot. So anyway, let's make up these two bridle cables. All right then, so these two little bridles are going to be made up of the same 3/16, it's also 3/16 stainless cable that I used for the steering system. This was left over from that. Some thimbles in 3/16, got to figure out how to get those apart, and some crimps, ferrules. I don't know what these things are called, but here's the main thing you have to know. With stainless steel cable, you have to use copper ones so you don't end up with a dielectric corrosion issue. And that's it, basically. I know that the longest side of the bridle will be 15-inch minus a shackle, so I'm going to call it 14 1/4, and the short side is basically as short as practical. Let's get started. I'm going to use shrink tube to basically hold the bridles together, and then because I don't have the facilities to crush these ferrules, swages, whatever they are, I'm going to take them to my local chandlery, which is Trotac here in Victoria, and they will crush them for me, but the shrink tube will hold everything in place in the meantime. Okay, so the first terminal is just an end terminal. As soon as I do this, this is going to fly around the room. What a mess. Okay, hang in there. Okay, so basically I first start with the shrink tube, then I start with the swage. Is that what this actually is, this thing? Oddly enough, I already know you can't get these on over even the slightest additional material like this piece of tape. I gotta get a knife. Okay, we'll put that on. Excellent. And I've learned to not try and put the thimble on until you've got it pretty well close. Back through. Excellent. Put the thimble in. Now, many of you will be much more experienced at this sort of thing than I am, but I found it works relatively well. When I lived in Nova Scotia, in my village, there was a rigger He had hands like huge maws. Anyway, he could braid stained wire cable. I don't understand how that was even possible. Anyway, he was quite a fellow. So basically I'm going to put this on here as tight as I can and then cinch it up with the heat gun. Excellent. I'm going to hold on to this for a bit because that will slip. Impatient Peter a little maybe? Okay, and the second one gets the shrink tube, the swagey, locky, whatever the heck this thing is called, and works its way back through and through the shrink tube. And as I said, this will be the connection to the turnbuckle to the upstairs helm cable, so this can be as short as possible. You need 3 hands for this, you really do. Okay, there we go. So I'll shrink that one right there. Without burning my fingers. Excellent. Oh, that's hot. I am expediting the cooling of the shrink tube by running it under cold water. See you in a minute. And there we go. There's one bridle made, and it actually worked out exactly as I hoped, where this cable is up against the side of the next one. Again, trying to keep the tension as close to a center line as possible. I'm really pleased with that. Let's make another one. You don't have to watch. So there we go. My 2 steering bridles ready to go. I'll take them in and get them crimped, and we can put them into service. All right then, did you think we'd be back down here again so soon? This is working out lovely, but now this is what's next. Some of you have been watching for a while know I did all the steering with new cable and sheaves. But to be fair, most of them are only temporarily installed. You might have seen me add the through bolts for the ones up forward, but these ones aren't through bolted yet. In other words, those screws are only about 2 inches long, certainly not strong enough to hold this. Now, this is the fashion piece for the transom. I can't through bolt here because I don't want to put a nut on the outside of the transom right here. So what I'm going to do, I made up these nice 3/16 stainless plates that will go over that, and basically they'll replace these 2 screws with 2 holes where I can put 2 long lag bolts into here, quite long, 3 inches long, and then one more here, maybe 2.5 inches long, and one more here, maybe 4.5 inches long, meaning I have a ton of meaty lag bolts holding this in place. And in fact, the plate vastly improves the strength of this fold in the in this sheet metal, and I'll do, of course, another one at the bottom. So this is pretty much going to be bulletproof, not just to do it. So to start, I just have to open up these 3/16 holes to 1/4 inch. What I'm actually going to do to make sure everything stays in alignment is actually put it back together temporarily with the screws again, and then what I'll do is re-drill the outer, or maybe I'll only do one. Anyway, I just want to hold it all back in proper alignment while I drill through to put in the lag bolts. Okay, I'm going to cut a little bit of a clearance hole, staying in 1/4 inch. But I want to switch to 3/16 right away so it really bites in the fashion piece there. Okay, let's let me pull out one of those bolts, never mind 8. This is going to be rock solid. I gotta have a nice long 3/16 drill, so that solves that problem. Okay. Hoo-yay-yay. Okay, and that's the bottom done. Oh yeah. You know what this lacks in elegance, it certainly makes up for in robustness. That is not going to move. And how about while I'm down here, I do something about this unused cockpit drain, which is only a few inches above sea level. I can hear my surveyor groaning. Sorry. There we go. That's better. Of course, when I rebuild the cockpit properly, I will use this again, but that might be
a little ways off. Oh, by the way, here's the bung for the exhaust port. You can see it was in the water for a long time. Anyway, it's here if I ever need it. And finally, as this is not a waterproof location, I'm going to give this a pretty generous dose of my favorite lanolin lubricant, fluid film, and as well, I think a little bit of rain protection in the form of this, or something like this. Yeah, right like that. That'll be just dandy. That'll keep it reasonably dry. Okay, and now over to the other side, because there's a shiv on that side too that needs a little attention. You might say, why didn't you do them together? Well, you can see I only have enough room in the cockpit to keep one set of lazarette's junk looked after. Okay, let's go. Well, just a little update, a bit of a Q&A, because there have been a ton of questions over the last little while, and I just haven't had a chance to answer them all, so I thought I'd bundle some of them together here. I've been crawling around the bilge for, you've seen, a couple of days, and I am beat. But anyway, one of the main questions was, how come you didn't slip the lines and take the boat out as soon as the engine ran? Well, the boat just isn't ready for that. Mostly the steering wasn't ready for that. There's a lot of loose gear. When you live on a boat as a barge for as long as I have, it's certainly not ready for sea. So I've been spending the last little while gearing the boat up and preparing for a sea trial of a sort. To be fair, it's not a genuine sea trial, because we're not going to be able to run the boat up to speed and check the prop and engine speed and stuff, because there is a forest growing on the bottom of the boat. That'll have to wait till after the haul out. So anyway, the first time we will run the boat will be on May the 2nd, Sunday, May the 2nd at 1 o'clock. And you know the exact time, because I'm going to live stream it. I figure you should all be there for the very first time. We start the engine and slip the lines and leave the dock. So I'll repeat that, Sunday, May the 2nd at 1 o'clock Pacific. Of course, we have another episode between now and then, and I'll remind you of it. So the stuff that had to be done really to get going to that is the steering, some of which you've seen, what I've been dealing with, and there'll be more of that. A lot of loose stuff, especially down here in the lazarette lockers. For instance, the water tanks were never chalked down, had to deal with that. Just a bunch of proper seamanship type stuff that really need to be looked after. Before I leave the dock, I have to make sure that the ground tackle, the anchor and windlass, are in operational and safe condition, because if I run into a problem, I have to be able to anchor. Likewise, I need radio and other minimum electrical and safety gear to be able to leave the dock. Victoria Harbour is a relatively busy harbour with a relatively active enforcement, because it's also an airport, albeit a bit quieter these days because of COVID. You are very likely to get pulled over in this harbor if you look at all sketchy, and well, maybe I look sketchy. Anyway, so have to be careful about that. Now, just a bunch of questions that came up in many of the comments. An hour meter. You're right, you haven't seen an hour meter yet. Yes, there is an hour meter. It's going to be in the nav station, the main panel where the electrical panel is, where all the other house type stuff is. I realize hour meter isn't really a house item, but because I bought essentially automotive gauges, I couldn't find a tachometer with a built-in hour meter, so the hour meter is separate, but of course it's required and it'll be going in. Protecting the wires from the chain in the helm, definitely. In fact, I have a little piece of brass ready to go in there, so that's definitely going to be looked after. A lot of comments that I wasn't double clamping a lot of things, and I think I even mentioned that I'm going to double clamp when the final installation is, but exhaust has to be all double clamped, fuel, certainly anything on a seacock, stuff like that. So just about everything serious will be double clamped eventually. A brief talk about the exhaust logic. I'm going to do an episode on exhaust design because I deviated slightly from common practice, but I can tell you that the exhaust system has been inspected and approved by Beta Marine, and I believe in the gravity from the injection exhaust elbow to the transom principle. Now, because it's a motorboat, I can get away with that a little more than on a sailboat, which heels fairly often, and that can mess things up depending on where the exhaust system is in relation to the center line. But because the boat doesn't heel much, I feel very confident that a full gravity system is much better, especially not having a gooseneck right at the transom, which is
commonly added to resist waves driving water into up the exhaust system. But what that does is create a dam higher than the gooseneck at the engine, or the exhaust tub with the engine, which means if that should fill up for any reason, and there's a bunch of ways that could happen, it would fill the engine. Anyway, won't get into that anymore right now, but we'll talk about that in depth. And the last thing, many people have asked, if I don't have a key for the boat, people can steal it. There will be a security key in a discrete location that is basically just to lock the systems, but it'll be turned on while cruising continuously, just turned off when I leave the boat for things like that. Anyway, let's get back to work.
Okay, so down on this side we have a single sheave, which is just the return, and it's set up a little bit differently in that it's on an angle so that everything lines up perfectly. Anyway, you've seen me put this in perhaps. So this is on this massive piece of sapele, which is locked in behind the chine stringer here, and screwed to this stringer and through screwed. So all of this needs strengthening. Certainly this needs to be through bolted to the backside, and these should be, if not through bolted, at least lag bolted to this. Not a lot of room down here. Okay, so I'm going to through bolt this with this piece of stainless threaded rod, and I'm going to put a nylock stainless steel nut on both sides, the front and the back. On the back I'll also put a washer. The only problem with putting nylocks on both ends of a piece of threaded rod is as you tighten them, you can't tell whether one's tightening and the other one's even engaging in the nylock or the nylon part. So what I do, I'll grab it in the middle where the threads are not valuable, and I'll wind this end on past the end of the threaded section so that there's a little bit of the threaded rod showing. Then I can drive it through. Might need to tap it through. Okay, so on the back side I take the washer and the other nylock, and I again pinch this little bit of the threaded rod so that I can make sure that I'm engaging the nylock on the back onto the threads past the nylon locker section. Da, 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 da. Will this actually fit? Oh, this will actually fit in here. Oh, fabulous. That makes that a lot easier. And there we go. There's one. Oh yeah. One more. Awesome.
And good, bright and beautiful morning to you all. We're back down in here. Let's go.
Alrighty. So today we're going to replace these two wood screws with two carriage bolts and put a bunch of big 5/16 galvanized lag bolts through here to the fashion piece, and that will make this completely bulletproof. And then, not a lot of room back here, but just enough. A washer, a lock washer, and a nut. And let's tighten that up. Looking at this now, I can see that if I drill this out to put in another one, I'll never be able to put the stuff on the back because of the angle of the transom and the fashion piece here. I'm going to say a single 5/16 carriage bolt, as well as everything else that's going in here, is going to be perfectly suitable for this. I'm going to say that's awesome. Okay, so now for some big 6-inch lag bolts into here. But I'd rather not run into the, I think that'll do it. All right, And then some relief for this. And in we go. Okay, and now for the mandatory backyard engineering mantra. That's not going anywhere. Not forgetting I still have to deal with this. This has got a check valve on it, which is jammed open, so that's not doing me any good. Oh gosh, I love this little pipe wrench. That was gifted to me. Okay, there we go. Oh man, that was in there. Basically less than a full turn. You know, it sort of pays to take everything on your boat slash car slash house slash airplane slash homemade rocket ship apart at least once to make sure that all the previous little things are done reasonably well. Unfortunately, I'm having to do this in 2 steps, but I'm grateful to be able to get even this 5 minutes from here in my local hardware store. All right, well, remember this and remember these? Well, I've now had them crimped at my local chandlery at Trotac. They did a lovely job of them, so they're ready to install here. And that should be pretty straightforward. Also got a handful of nice new shackles. Let's have a look here. Reminds me of, as a kid, being on the foredeck of my family boat, trying not to drop shackle bits. Yeah, that'll have to go through here first. Okay, there we go. And there we go. Now, of course, these shackles will be wired, but for now, let's just get everything lined up. Okay, and the final connection. Okay, so that all needs to be wired, and of course the turnbuckles need to be tightened. So let's put a little tension on this. Now there's a number of ways I can tighten this, but this will be the fine tune. Okay, I'm gonna say that worked out very nicely. Now I still have to put in my piece of high molecular weight plastic in here to make sure that none of this catches itself, because of course it moves across each other and I don't want it catching because that would jam the steering. But in principle, I'm very happy with this. And these 2 eyelets would go forward and to the upper helm cables, which will come along here as well. So very good. Now I just have to devise the little slider pieces. And in fact, I've come up with a system to mount the hose too so that it won't be in the way. Great. Okay, and nice and smooth. I love it, I love it, I love it. So it's exactly 2.5 turns lock to lock. So from center helm, it's 1 1/4 and back 1 1/4. I just love it. Well, hello and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week. The weather is turning a little bit, but I like being outside so much I thought we'd still be up on the bridge deck. Let's get straight to the beer. This is Daggeron's Amber. I love this brewery. I love everything they do. And I've never had the Amber, and it's an unfiltered, so I'm really looking forward to this. I deserve this beer. This has been a heck of a couple of days crawling around in the village and all that. Anyway, I'm really, really pleased. We're getting pretty close. The boat is pretty close to shipshape. A few things to do still. You'll have noted that I mentioned that we're going to do a little bit of a sea trial next Sunday. And I hope you can join for a live stream for that. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so to Daggeron's Amber, unfiltered. Bit too much head. Okay. What a perfect beer. Oh, it almost tastes like a cask beer. Really rich. Oh my gosh, that's really great. And the being unfiltered just gives it a little bit of that. Okay, hazy. Oh, loving it. Okay, wind's coming up. I hope you can hear me. I want to get through this pretty quick. Last week's winner of a Travels with Geordie t-shirt was Kevin O'Keefe. So Kevin, cheers to you. Get a hold of me and we'll make sure you get your shirt. I want to thank, absolutely fantastic, 4 new Patreons came on over the last couple of weeks actually. John Mason Hill, thank you John. Thilo Agath, I hope I pronounced it correctly, thank you. Sax, simply Sax, thank you as well. And Robert DeCax, thank you Robert, and thank you all. It means so much to be able to just carry on and get done what we want to do. Again, PayPal supporters, 2 new PayPal supporters, Dana Andrews and George Pietsch. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you to both of you. Cheers. I do want to say what an overwhelming series of comments for last week's Word of the Week. Thank you. And so much thanks pouring back. It really felt wonderful. This whole project is thanks to all of you, and I'm so incredibly grateful and motivated. It's just a wonderful experience to be able to work on your own boat, but as a community, and the motivation of having something for you every week is just so powerful. So thanks to you all, yet again, all this thanks. It's a big thanks love in, isn't it? We need a Word of the Week, and because I haven't mentioned for a while what the Word of the Week actually is, if you'd like to win a Travels with Geordie t-shirt, I hope you can hear me, simply use the word I'm about to say in a comment down below, and I pick at random over the first week or so of comments, and if I pick you, you'll win a Travels with Geordie t-shirt. So the Word of the Week this week is shipshape. Yes, we've got to get the boat shipshape. Use the word, you know what to do. Cheers. Oh, what a perfect time.